He told me, "The kids go to boarding school or there's no wedding." And with a shaking hand, I ripped up the plans and watched his carefully constructed world fall apart. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, even though it might seem that way. I'm 38 years old, recently single and raising 2 children, a boy of 12 and a girl who's 10. Their father passed away suddenly a few years ago. It's been the 3 of us navigating life since then, a tight little unit. Some days are harder than others, filled with the ghosts of what was and the anxieties of what will be, but I'm immensely proud of the life we've built together. My children are my anchors. They're bright, compassionate, and incredibly resilient. Watching them grow has been my greatest joy, and their well-being remains my constant motivation. About 18 months ago, I met him, let's call him Mark, at a friend's backyard party. He was 34, and initially he embodied everything I thought I wanted. Gregarious, attractive, with an undeniable charm that seemed to draw everyone towards him. We connected quickly, drawn to each other in ways that I couldn't quite explain. Soon, dates became a regular part of my life, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. He made a conscious effort to connect with my children early on, something that made me feel incredibly hopeful. He'd suggest outings to the park or ice cream, making small talk and genuinely trying to understand who they were. The kids were polite enough, but I sensed a guardedness, a hesitation to fully embrace him. I suspected it stemmed from the trauma of losing their father, a natural reluctance to open their hearts fully again so soon. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that building trust takes time. Initially, everything felt effortless. Mark seemed to understand, or at least outwardly acknowledge, that my children were my primary focus and that we were a package deal. He'd compliment my parenting, and often talked about how much he admired my commitment to them. Having someone seem to genuinely understand my life felt incredibly validating. Our relationship deepened organically. Mark began spending more time at my house, sometimes staying overnight. The kids tolerated it. There were no complaints, no dramatic outbursts, but neither was there genuine excitement. I hoped we were all slowly adjusting to the possibility of a blended future. But, looking back, I can see the small cracks forming, the subtle signs I chose to ignore. For instance, Mark would make seemingly innocuous comments about the house. Suggestions about modernizing the decor or redecorating the kids' rooms. At the time, I dismissed them as harmless expressions of his own aesthetic preferences, thinking he just wanted to add his personal touch to our shared space. He also spoke a lot about our future, painting a picture of travel, shared experiences, maybe even expanding our family someday. I wasn't opposed to those ideas in theory, but I always reiterated that my children's needs would always come first. He'd nod and smile, but now I wonder if he ever truly understood what that meant. Then there was his brother, David, who came up frequently in conversation, usually in a negative light. David, it seemed, was perpetually struggling. He'd lost his job, was having trouble finding new employment, and was currently living with their parents. Mark portrayed him as someone fundamentally incapable, a drain on everyone around him. At first, I felt sympathetic. We all have family members who need a little extra support from time to time, and it wasn't my place to judge. However, as I got to know Mark better, I began to realize that David's problems were far more profound than he initially let on. He seemed unable to hold down a job, made consistently poor decisions, and displayed a distinct lack of motivation to improve his situation. Yet, even that didn't feel like a deal-breaker then. Mark and I were growing closer, and the idea of building a future together was increasingly appealing. It had been so long since I had a partner, and the thought of sharing my life with someone felt incredibly comforting. About a year into our relationship, the idea of marriage started to surface. Mark had been leaving not-so-subtle hints, pointing out rings in magazines, discussing wedding venues. I wasn't oblivious, and to be honest, I welcomed the idea. The kids were thriving, we had a solid routine, and I felt ready to take the next step. I knew blending our lives would present challenges, but I truly believed we could navigate them together. I envisioned a simple, heartfelt proposal in the park, the place where we shared one of our earliest, most cherished dates. No grand spectacle, just something authentic. The day arrived, and a mix of nerves and exhilaration bubbled inside me. As we strolled through the park, I poured out my feelings for her, then knelt, presented the ring, and asked her to marry me. Her yes was ecstatic, and she immediately slipped on the ring, already lost in daydreams of wedding plans and our future. In that moment, everything felt absolutely perfect. Little did I know how quickly that illusion would shatter. The initial weeks post-proposal were a whirlwind of excitement. Sarah threw herself into wedding planning with abandon, meticulously choosing color palettes, researching venues, and devouring Pinterest boards as if it were her sole occupation. I struggled to keep pace, balancing work, caring for the kids, and managing everything else. I willingly ceded control of the wedding details to her. She seemed so genuinely happy, and I didn't want to diminish that joy. However, as time wore on, subtle inconsistencies began to surface, ones that made me uneasy. Initially, they were just passing remarks, seemingly innocuous. Comments about how the house needed a woman's touch, or how she envisioned our future being more polished. I wasn't entirely sure what she meant by polished, but I dismissed it. Perhaps it was her way of expressing her desire to contribute, to make the space feel like her own as well. Then, the suggestions started, subtle at first. Wouldn't it be nice to clear out some of the kids' old things? It would give the house a more open feel. Or, maybe we could move some of their things to the garage to keep the rooms tidier. Individually, these comments seemed insignificant, but collectively, they suggested she was trying to erase elements of the home we had built together. I kept my concerns to myself, hoping I was simply overthinking things, that she was just excited about the prospect of building a life together. Then came the furniture. One Saturday morning, Sarah arrived with a catalog and a comprehensive plan to upgrade the living room. I wasn't even sure what needed upgrading. The couch was perfectly fine, the coffee table was sturdy, and the kids' bean bags in the corner were absolutely non-negotiable. She rambled on about how she wanted the space to feel more adult and less chaotic. I had to physically bite my tongue to prevent myself from snapping. This was a family home, not some staged magazine spread. The first real conflict arose when she suggested transforming the spare room, which served as both a study and a craft space for the kids, into a guest room. She presented it as a compromise, emphasizing that it would still be available for the kids to use occasionally. That room was more than just a space. It was where the kids created their art projects, where I worked late into the night after they were asleep. And frankly, it was one of the few spaces in the house that still felt truly ours. I told her flatly that we weren't changing it. She didn't argue outright, but I could see the irritation etched on her face. She made a passive-aggressive comment about how we would eventually have to figure out how to make space for everyone, and I let the matter drop. Around this time, Jake started appearing more frequently in her conversations. Apparently, he was staying with her parents, but according to Sarah, it was only temporary. She mentioned his need for support and how difficult it was for her to see him struggling. I didn't really respond, unsure of what to say. Jake wasn't my responsibility, and I was already juggling an overwhelming amount. Then came the day she asked if Jake could come over for dinner. She explained that he wanted to get to know me and the kids better since we were all going to be family soon. I reluctantly agreed, driven by curiosity, to be honest. The dinner was excruciatingly awkward. Jake arrived late, radiating an aura of poor choices, and spent the majority of the evening complaining about how difficult his life was. He barely acknowledged the kids, who had been so eager to meet him, and focused his attention solely on Sarah. I attempted to make small talk, but it felt like extracting teeth. After Jake left, Sarah was all smiles, raving about how wonderful it was that we'd all gotten together. I have to admit, I was at a completely different dinner, one that felt more like an obligation than a joy. I mentioned to her that Jake seemed to be struggling with something, and she immediately became defensive, insisting he just needed a break, a chance to get back on his feet. I let the conversation drop, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her quick defense felt misplaced. A couple of weeks later, Sarah started bringing up Jake's name more and more. She confided that her parents were pressuring her to lend him a hand, and that she felt torn between her family and our future together. I knew she was trying to test the waters, but I wasn't willing to take the bait. It was then that the request started to escalate. She casually brought up the idea of Jake staying with us for a little while after the wedding. I immediately said I wasn't comfortable with that, but she wouldn't let it go. She kept repeating that it would only be temporary and that he would stay out of the way. When I asked where exactly he would be staying, she offhandedly suggested the spare room. I reminded her that it was essentially the kids' playroom and extra space, and she dismissed my concern as if it were nothing. The conversation was ultimately unproductive, but it left me with a really uneasy feeling. Around that same time, I also started to notice a change in how Sarah interacted with my children. She began asking them questions about school and their daily routines, which seemed innocent enough at first. But then she started making these peculiar comments about how they would benefit from structure, or how they might enjoy a new environment. One day, my son asked me what a boarding school was. I froze. I asked him where he had heard that term, and he said that Sarah had mentioned it. That was the moment that every alarm bell in my head started blaring. When I confronted Sarah about it, she laughed it off, claiming she was just talking about how boarding schools have amazing programs for kids. She insisted it was just a casual conversation, but I was far from convinced. I told her that I didn't want her planting those kinds of ideas in their heads, and she got defensive, arguing that she was just trying to be helpful. At that point, I couldn't ignore the widening cracks in our relationship. It felt like Sarah was focusing less on building a life with us and more on reshaping our lives to fit her own agenda. I was beginning to feel like I wasn't just blending a family, but being pressured into making concessions that I wasn't at all comfortable with. After that charged conversation about Sarah mentioning boarding school to my son, I really tried to put it behind us. I told myself that it was just a misunderstanding, maybe just her awkward way of trying to connect with my kids. I really wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt because at that point, I still believed that we were on the same path. But as the days went by, things began to click into place, and it wasn't pretty. I had no idea just how far she was willing to go until one evening when she sat me down and laid it all out on the table. Started like any other evening. The kids were upstairs finishing their homework, and I was trying to unwind on the couch after a long and tiring day. Sarah walked in with a determined look on her face, an expression that told me that whatever she was about to say, I was definitely not going to like it. She sat down across from me. "We need to talk," she began. I sighed internally. "Okay, what's on your mind?" She hesitated for a moment, which was unusual for her. Sarah usually didn't hold back when she wanted something. "I've been thinking a lot about how we're going to make this work once we're married," she said carefully. "Okay," I said, already bracing myself for what was coming. "It's about the house," she continued. "I really don't think it's going to work the way it is now, not with all of us living here." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean? We're doing fine as it is." She shook her head, giving me a look as if I was missing something completely obvious. "No, we're not. This house is simply too small for all of us to live comfortably. We're going to have to make some changes." I could feel my patience wearing thin. "Sarah, the kids have their own rooms." I'd finally carved out my own little sanctuary, the office/spare room. It wasn't exactly Pinterest-worthy, but it was functional, mine. "So, what kind of changes are we talking about?" I asked, genuinely curious. That's when the bomb dropped. "I think we should explore the possibility of sending the kids to boarding school." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Boarding school? The suggestion felt bizarrely familiar. Hadn't the kids brought it up jokingly once or twice after watching some movie? Boarding school? Are you being serious right now? I needed to understand if I had actually heard correctly. "Completely serious," she replied, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "I've been researching some incredible programs. Think about it, a top-notch education, a diverse group of friends, a real sense of independence. It's an unparalleled opportunity for them to grow." I narrowed my eyes slightly, a knot forming in my stomach. "And what's the real reason behind this sudden interest in boarding schools?" My gut told me this wasn't purely about the kids' well-being. "Because it feels like there's more to this than just them." She hesitated, just for a fleeting second, before her resolve hardened. "Okay, fine," she said. a sharp edge creeping into her voice. If the kids were at boarding school, we'd have the space. Jake could move in and finally have his own room. He needs a stable environment, and honestly, this feels like the most straightforward way to provide it. There it was. The underlying motive laid bare. A wave of anger washed over me. You want me to send my children away, uproot their lives, so your grown, allegedly sober, unemployed brother can have a room in their house? Are you even hearing the words coming out of your mouth? She sighed, a dramatic, put-upon sigh that implied I was the one being unreasonable. Jake's going through a tough time right now. He needs support, and this would offer him a chance for a new beginning. It's not just about him, though. It's about us building a life together, a future. We have to consider what's best for everyone involved. What's best for everyone? I repeated, my voice rising with each word. Sarah, what's best for my kids is being here, in their home, with their friends, their school, their life. Not being shipped off to God knows where so your brother can get comfortable. Her face tightened, her gaze unwavering. You're being incredibly narrow-minded, she snapped. You're not even willing to entertain the idea of what boarding school could offer them. It's not like I'm suggesting something terrible. They'd receive an exceptional education, and we'd gain the space we need to actually start our life together. I don't need a fresh start, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. My kids don't need a fresh start. They need stability, something they've been sorely lacking since their mother passed. And I refuse to jeopardize that because Jake can't seem to pull himself together. Frustration contorted her features. Why are you being so difficult about this? Jake is family. He needs us. Isn't that what families are supposed to do? Help each other. Jake is your family, I corrected her, carefully enunciating each word. My family is upstairs, doing their homework, in a house that is supposed to be their safe haven. You don't get to walk in here and decide their lives are less valuable than your brother's comfort. My words seemed to hit a nerve. Her tone instantly shifted from defensive to overtly hostile. You're acting like I'm trying to harm them, she accused, her voice sharp. I'm not. I'm trying to build a life where everyone has the space they need, where we aren't crammed together. But you're so resistant to change, so stuck in your ways, that you can't see how beneficial this could be for everyone. This isn't about what's beneficial for everyone, I retorted, my anger now a palpable force. This is about you trying to maneuver my kids out of their own home to make room for your brother. That's not going to happen, Sarah. Not now, not ever. She abruptly stood up, crossing her arms tightly across her chest. Fine, she declared, barely managing to contain the tantrum she so often resorted to. If you're not even willing to consider this, then maybe we need to reevaluate everything. I stood up to face her, meeting her furious glare head-on. What's that supposed to mean? It means, she said slowly, deliberately, that if you can't put my family first for once, then maybe this isn't going to work. I'm not going to marry someone who doesn't respect my family. I stared at her, completely blindsided. Respect your family? You want to talk about respect? What about respecting my kids? My family? She didn't even flinch. It's your choice? She repeated, the words hanging in the air like a threat. Me or your kids? Choose, because I won't accept anything in between. Then she walked away, leaving me rooted to the spot. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. I was stunned. I'd sensed a shift in the dynamic for weeks, a subtle distance, but this felt like a betrayal of everything we had built. For the first time since accepting her proposal, a chilling doubt crept into my mind. Had I made the wrong decision? The atmosphere in our home had been tense and strained, like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. Every mention of Jake's name felt like stepping onto a minefield. Then, Jake himself showed up unannounced, and a wave of pure revulsion washed over me. The gall of him was astounding. Did he have no self-awareness, no concept of boundaries? You don't just waltz into someone's life and expect to be welcomed with open arms. His audacity wasn't just infuriating. It was deeply offensive. It wasn't the first time Jake had dropped by uninvited, but after everything that had transpired lately, my patience had worn thin. It was a Saturday morning, usually a time for lazy family moments. I was in the kitchen, preparing a simple breakfast, while the kids were engrossed in cartoons in the living room. The knock at the door was sharp, insistent, the kind that made it clear the person on the other side wasn't going to give up easily. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I already had a bad feeling about who it might be. Just ignore it, I told the children, hoping it was a delivery or a salesman. But the knocking persisted, growing more urgent. Resigned, I opened the door, and there he was, Jake, sporting his usual self-satisfied smirk. He exuded an air of casual nonchalance, as if he were just popping over to a friend's for a casual visit, not invading a space where he clearly didn't belong. "Hey," he said, nodding in my direction. "Thought I'd drop by. Got a minute?" I blinked, struggling to comprehend why he was standing on my doorstep. "Sarah didn't mention you were coming," I stated plainly, trying to keep my voice neutral. Jake shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Didn't think I needed an invitation. Sarah mentioned you guys were still ironing out the details about me moving in, so I figured I'd come check out the place, get a feel for it." The sheer nerve of this man was incomprehensible. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, forcing myself to remain calm. "We haven't made any decisions about you moving in." Jake chuckled, as if I had told a particularly amusing joke. "Come on. Sarah made it sound like it was practically a done deal. Just a matter of working out the logistics, right?" Before I could even formulate a response, he pushed past me, striding into the living room. My youngest glanced up from the television, a puzzled expression on his face, while my oldest daughter shot me a look that mirrored my own growing frustration and anger. "What's he doing here?" she mouthed. "Nice setup," Jake commented, casting a possessive gaze around the room. He casually plopped down on the couch, stretching out as if he owned the place. I clenched my fists, fighting to maintain control. "Jake, this isn't a good time. You should have called before coming over." Before he could reply, Sarah appeared in the doorway, walking in as if nothing was wrong. She hesitated for a fraction of a second when she saw Jake, then forced an overly bright, cheerful smile. "Oh, Jake, I wasn't expecting you so early." "Early?" I repeated, turning to her, the disbelief evident in my voice. "I didn't know he was coming at all." She waved her hand dismissively, as if it were a minor detail. "I must have forgotten to mention it. No harm done, right?" I glanced at the children and asked them to go upstairs. Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to Sarah and Jake, my voice barely above a whisper. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice tight with contained fury. "Jake just told me he's here to check out the house because you've been talking about him moving in." Sarah's smile wavered, but she quickly recovered. "Honey," she said, stepping closer to me, her voice taking on a syrupy tone. "I honestly thought I was helping, that's all." Jake was in such a bind, and my thinking was, if I could just show Sarah how we could possibly make it work, she might be more understanding of his situation. "We've talked about this already," I said, my voice tight. My patience was completely gone. "I told you I'm not comfortable with this, period." Then Jake, still lounging like a king on my couch, jumped in. "Come on," he said, like it was nothing. "It's not like I'm asking for the moon. Just a place to crash, a little breathing room. You'd barely even know I was there." I turned to him, my voice flat. "This isn't your decision to make, Jake. My house, my rules. And the answer is no." He scoffed, finally getting up. "Fine, fine. No need to get your knickers in a twist. I'll leave you two lovebirds to sort it out." He grabbed his jacket, headed for the door, and mumbled something I couldn't quite catch under his breath. The second he was gone, I swung around to Sarah. "What the hell was that charade all about?" "What do you mean?" she snapped, immediately defensive. "Jake is my family. He needs help, and I'm trying to figure out a solution. You're the one making this harder than it needs to be." "I'm making it harder?" My voice was definitely louder now. "You've been plotting behind my back, making decisions about my house, my kids, my family. How is that even remotely okay?" Sarah crossed her arms, practically daring me to argue. You're being impossible. Jake is family, and family helps each other. Why can't you just get that through your head? Because it's not just about Jake, I practically shouted. This is about you trying to shove my kids aside to make room for him. They've been through enough change as it is. I'm not turning their lives upside down to make things easier for you or your brother. Her face twisted with frustration. You are so unbelievably stubborn, she spat out. Do you even care about how hard this is for me? I'm trying to build a future with you. But you're so busy clinging to your perfect little picture to even see it. This perfect little picture is my kids' lives. I shot back. And I'm not going to apologize for protecting them. If you can't wrap your head around that, then maybe you're not ready to be a part of this family. Her expression hardened, and I knew, deep down, what was coming next. Fine, she said, her voice like ice. If you're not willing to budge, maybe we need to seriously rethink this whole thing. I stood there, letting her words really sink in. Then, I took a deep breath and met her eyes. You're right, I said as calmly as I could manage. We do need to rethink this, and I've already made my decision. Her face flickered with something shock, maybe anger. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm choosing my kids, I said, my voice firm. They come first, always. If you can't accept that simple fact, then we just don't have a future together. The silence that hung in the air was deafening. She stared at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing, but I refused to back down. Is that it then? She asked, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Yeah, I said, the word heavy. That's it. And with that, I turned around and walked away, leaving her standing there, speechless, in the middle of the living room. Walking away from Sarah that afternoon was one of the hardest things I've ever done. There was a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. There was relief, definitely, knowing that I had stood my ground and made the right decision for my children. But there was also a profound sadness, a heavy weight in my chest. This wasn't just the end of an argument or even a fight. It was the end of a dream, the end of everything we'd been working toward, or so I thought. Intellectually, I knew the breakup was inevitable, given how things had escalated. But that didn't make the pain any less real. Sarah didn't take it well, to put it mildly. For the first couple of days after I told her it was over, she barely spoke to me. She avoided my gaze, barely acknowledging my presence even when she stopped by to pick up a few things she'd left behind at the house. For a moment, I actually thought maybe she was processing everything, trying to come to terms with it. But then, the storm hit, and it hit hard. It started with a phone call concerning the wedding plans, a wedding that would never happen. Sarah called me one evening, her voice cold and detached, all business. So, are you canceling everything? She asked, her voice laced with a strange mix of anticipation and disappointment. I kept my answer concise. Yes. No need for lengthy explanations. It was over. There's absolutely no reason to proceed with any of the plans. Her response was immediate, almost too quick. Good. Then we need to discuss the money. I frowned, a knot forming in my stomach. What money? The deposits, she snapped, the word sharp and accusatory. I've already put a deposit on the caterer, and I expect you to reimburse me, since you're the one calling it off. It's only fair. I hesitated, realizing, perhaps not for the first time, that her demands would never cease, not even amidst a breakup. Sarah, I already paid the venue deposit, which was considerably more than what you spent on the caterer. That's not the point, she retorted, her tone growing sharper. You're the one who decided to end this. Therefore, you should take responsibility for the financial repercussions. I took a deep breath, attempting to maintain a semblance of calm. I'm not reimbursing you for anything, Sarah. We both contributed to this wedding, fully aware of the risks associated with non-refundable deposits. You made your decisions and I made mine. We share the responsibility equally. She clearly disapproved of my response. So what? Are you just going to leave me footing the bill for hundreds of dollars? I'm already out of pocket for thousands, I responded, my voice firm, refusing to waver. The venue, the invitations, the flowers, I covered it all. I won't pay even more simply because you want to shift the blame. The conversation proved futile. She persisted in insisting I was being unjust, while I remained steadfast. Eventually, she hung up on me in a fit of anger, but the calls didn't stop there. For days after, my phone was flooded with texts, emails, and voicemails, all insisting I pay for the caterer. At one point, she even threatened to take me to small claims court if I didn't comply with her demands. It wasn't solely about the money, though. Sarah wasn't satisfied leaving things between us as a simple financial disagreement. She started disseminating her version of events to our mutual friends and family, portraying me as the villain who had abandoned her and cruelly refused to assist her struggling brother. My phone rang incessantly with calls from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in months, all eager to know what was happening and why I was behaving so heartlessly. One relative, a distant cousin I barely knew, even lectured me about family values. "Jake is experiencing a difficult period," she declared. "It would have been a small sacrifice to provide him with assistance. It's not as if it would leave you destitute." I bit back my retort, not wanting to argue with someone who clearly lacked the full picture, but her words stung nonetheless. No one seemed to consider my children or how Sarah's demands would have impacted their lives. Their focus remained solely on her narrative, in which I played the heartless villain who refused to help. Thankfully, I had my own strong support network. My close friends and a few relatives knew the truth and supported me without question. "You did the right thing," one of my friends affirmed. "Anyone who attempts to push your children out of their home doesn't deserve to be part of your life." Still, the fallout was exhausting. Canceling the wedding was a logistical nightmare. I had to contact all the vendors, explain the situation without divulging too many personal details, and navigate the awkwardness of calling off an event that people had already marked on their calendars. The majority of people were understanding, but a few attempted to pry for more information. I kept my responses vague, stating that it was a mutual decision and that we realized we were not aligned on our vision for the future. Throughout everything, my children didn't fully understand what was happening, but they sensed that something had shifted. My oldest asked one night, "Are we not having a stepmom anymore?" I smiled gently and shook my head. "No, we're not, but do you know what? That's okay. We are still a family, and nothing will ever change that." They appeared relieved, which solidified my conviction that I had made the right decision. The thought of them being shipped off to some boarding school so Jake could move into their rooms still made my blood boil. Sarah had seriously underestimated the importance I placed on my role as a mother, and that was her biggest mistake. The final straw came a week later when Sarah arrived unannounced, intending to collect the remainder of her belongings. She walked into what used to be our house like she still belonged. My house. Her eyes swept across the living room, the kitchen, lingering on the photos on the mantelpiece. I could feel her assessing the space, almost like she was looking for evidence of my life without her. I stayed put in the kitchen, a knot of tension twisting in my stomach. I didn't say anything, just let her gather her belongings, her silence heavy and suffocating. When she was almost finished, she paused at the doorway, turned, and her voice, clipped and cold, sliced through the quiet. "You'll regret this," she said. "You had the chance to make something real, something good, and you threw it away." I met her gaze, my own as steady as I could manage. "No, Sarah, I didn't throw anything away. I protected my kids and our home. If you can't understand that, then we were never meant to be." A flicker of something, maybe anger or frustration, crossed her face. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. She let out a short, bitter laugh, muttered something under her breath that I didn't quite catch, and then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. The house felt lighter, yet somehow emptier. This wasn't the future I imagined when I asked Sarah to marry me. Maybe it's for the best. My kids are safe. Their home is secure. I am free from the constant upheaval she brought into our lives. Still, I find myself replaying the past, wondering if I missed some early warning sign. Could I have avoided this mess? I'm still sorting through everything. I'll update you all if anything else comes up. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Well, I was wrong about that being the end of it. Canceling the wedding and breaking up with Sarah turned out to be only the beginning of a much larger, uglier drama. Leaving her wasn't just about protecting my children and our home. It also meant dealing with a storm I never saw brewing, from her spreading lies about me to her brother, Jake, making veiled threats. The intensity escalated into the absurd. Sarah immediately started playing the victim with our families, but she soon elevated her performance to a whole new level. She told our mutual friends, even some of my family members, that I was abusive and controlling, painting a picture of herself as the helpless victim. Suddenly, I was bombarded with calls and messages, everyone wanting an explanation. Some were sympathetic, but others were outright accusatory, implying I was capable of pushing someone to their breaking point. One friend, Dave, actually called me and said, "Hey, I heard you made Sarah's life a living hell. What's going on?" I had to take a deep breath before responding. "Dave, do you honestly think I'm capable of that? She wanted me to send my kids to boarding school so her brother could move in. That's the truth of it." Thankfully, Dave was reasonable enough to listen, and after I explained everything, he backed off, but not everyone was so understanding. Sarah had a real talent for twisting narratives. She was always skilled at portraying herself as the injured party. And Jake, of course, was even worse. A week after the breakup, he sent me a text out of the blue. It read, "You're a spineless coward for not helping your family. I might swing by to get what's mine. You better hope I don't have to force it." His sense of entitlement was staggering. I hadn't taken anything from Jake. The only thing I had done was refuse to allow him to walk all over my family and me. His text was infuriating and also unsettling. I wasn't going to take any chances, so I called a locksmith the next day and changed all the locks. For days, I expected Jake to appear, banging on the door or making a scene, but instead, everything went strangely quiet. It wasn't until later that I found out why. A mutual friend told me that Jake had been caught stealing money from Sarah. Apparently, during one of his drunken binges, he accessed her bank account and emptied it. He took thousands of dollars. The news hit me like a dull thud, more confirming than shocking. Jake's behavior had been a consistent drain for years. He was always finding ways to have others fix the situations he created. But this time, he'd truly crossed a line, exceeding even his usual levels of irresponsibility. Exacerbating the situation was his complete disappearance after taking Sarah's money. His phone went straight to voicemail, texts remained unanswered, and no one had spotted him for days. Sarah was left struggling, desperately figuring out how to manage bills and the significant debt he had burdened her with. Then, as if life wanted to test my patience, Sarah unexpectedly showed up at my place. No call, no text, just a sudden appearance at my front door, looking more worn down than I'd ever seen her. When I opened the door, before I could even greet her, she launched into a tearful story. "I need help," she pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. "Jake took everything. I don't know what to do." I stood there for a moment, absorbing her words. I flashed back to all the difficult times she had put me and my children through, and any potential sympathy dissolved. "Sarah," I responded firmly, "this isn't my problem to solve. You made the choice to bring Jake into your life, into this house. You prioritized him above everything else, including my kids. Now you're facing the consequences." Her expression shifted instantly from one of pleading to one of anger. "How can you be so heartless?" she demanded, her voice sharper now. "I thought you cared about me." "I did," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "But you showed me your true priorities. You prioritized your brother's convenience over my children's stability. And I'm not going to clean up the mess that has resulted from that decision. This is entirely on you." She tried to argue, but I cut her off. "You need to leave," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm done with this." She stood there for a moment, looking shocked. Then, without another word, she simply turned and walked away. In the weeks that followed, the ramifications of Jake's actions continued to unfold in Sarah's life. He remained missing, and her financial situation was a disaster. Mutual friends started distancing themselves from her as the truth about Jake's actions became clear. The narratives she had spread about me began to fall apart under scrutiny, and people began to see the truth of the situation. Looking back, I can honestly say I don't regret any of it. Not the end of our friendship, not the canceled wedding plans, and certainly not choosing my children over Sarah and the chaos of her family. It was a harsh lesson, but one I will never forget. The people you allow into your life should enrich it, not deplete it, and if that requires closing the door on someone who disregards your boundaries, then so be it. My children will always be my priority, and that's not something I'm willing to compromise.